They made us laugh, they made us feel, and they turned High to High into a British TV treasure. But behind the sunshine of Maplin's holiday camp lies a bittersweet truth. 13 beloved stars are no longer with us. Some faced sudden tragedy, others fought quiet battles away from the spotlight. And their final chapters will shock you. Today, we look back at 13 unforgettable actors whose light went out far too soon, each with a story as captivating as the show itself. Which one will surprise you most? Paul Shane as Ted Bovice. When Paul Shane first stepped onto the set of High to High in 1980 as Ted Bovice, he was 40 years old, a roguish, fast-talking camp host with a twinkle in his eye and a knack for turning every situation to his advantage. On screen, Ted was the life of Maplin's holiday camp, forever scheming, charming the guests, and delivering punchlines with a wink. Off-screen, Shane knew the character's cheeky resilience all too well. It was drawn from his own hard-won battles in life. Born June 19, 1940, in Thryburgh, West Riding of Yorkshire, England, Shane's early years were far removed from show business. He left school to work as a miner, a dangerous and physically punishing job he kept until a back injury at 27 abruptly ended his time underground. The accident could have been the end of his working life, but instead it was the start of something entirely different. With a natural gift for humor, he began performing in working men's clubs, honing a sharp comedic timing that would later define his TV career. Throughout the 1970s, Shane picked up guest spots on British television, but High to High made him a household name. As Ted Bovice, he mastered the delicate balance between lovable rogue and opportunist, winning over audiences even when his character was knee-deep in trouble. Behind the laughter, though, Shane's personal life had its share of hardship. His wife, Dory, whom he married in 1967, died suddenly in 2001, leaving him devastated after more than 3 decades together. Shane kept working well into his later years, appearing in shows like You Rang, My Lord and Oh, Dr. Beeching. But his health was in slow decline. Friends noticed he moved more carefully, and there were whispers of heart problems and diabetes quietly taking their toll. In public, he remained the consummate entertainer, but in private, the loss of his wife and the grind of ill health weighed heavily. On May 16, 2013, Paul Shane died at the age of 72 in a Rotherham hospice. Ruth Maddock as Glattis Pugh. When Ruth Maddock burst onto screens in 1980 as Glattis Pugh, the flirtatious, melodramatic Welsh yellowcoat of High to High, she was 37 years old, armed with a hypnotic smile and a voice that could switch from sultry announcements to biting sarcasm in a heartbeat. Glattis was the camp's sweetheart and schemer rolled into one, pining for her boss while keeping the guests in line, a role that quickly made Maddock a national favorite. Born April 16, 1943 in Norwich, England, but raised in Wales, Ruth's life was far from the glossy world of television. Orphaned at a young age, she was brought up by her grandmother in Llansamlet, Swansea, a childhood marked by both discipline and quiet loneliness. Determined to escape her circumstances, she earned a place at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art, where she sharpened her natural flair for performance. Her early years on stage were filled with touring repertory theater, musicals, and occasional West End breaks, building a resilience that would serve her well in a notoriously unstable profession. By the time High to High came along, Maddock had already worked in television and film, including a role in the acclaimed Fiddler on the Roof, 1971. But Glattis Pugh changed everything. Her perfectly timed pauses, the arching of an eyebrow, the lilting Welsh intonation, every detail made the character unforgettable. Off-screen, Ruth's marriage to actor Philip Maddock was a stormy affair. They wed in 1961 and had 2 children, but the relationship endured years of strain under the pressure of touring schedules, competing careers, and personal differences, ultimately ending in divorce in 1981, just as High to High was cementing her fame. In later years, Maddock remained a familiar face on stage and TV, from pantomimes to drama series. But her career was not without turbulence. A serious fall in 2019 left her with significant hip injuries, forcing her to cancel theater appearances. She spoke candidly about the emotional toll of being typecast, the struggles of sustaining steady work after the height of fame, and the quiet isolation that sometimes followed long tours. On December 9, 2022, Ruth Maddock died at the age of 79 after surgery for a fall. Simon Cadell as Geoffrey Fairbrother. When Simon Cadell first appeared in High to High in 1980 as Geoffrey Fairbrother, he was 30 years old, a polished, Oxford-educated entertainment manager who had abandoned a promising academic career for the chaotic world of Maplin's holiday camp. On screen, Fairbrother was the perfect foil to the camp's more eccentric staff. Charming, refined, and endlessly patient, yet often bewildered by the absurdity around him. Cadell's effortless mix of dry wit and subtle vulnerability made the character one of the show's most beloved figures. Born July 19, 1950, in London, England, Simon John Cadell grew up surrounded by the arts. His father was a theatrical agent, his godfather was actor Sir John Gielgud, and his sister Selina Cadell would also become a well-known actress. From an early age, Simon seemed destined for the stage, studying at the Bristol Old Vic Theatre School before building an impressive repertoire in classical theatre. His pre-High to High credits included Shakespearean roles in A Midsummer Night's Dream and The Merchant of Venice, where he honed the poise and diction that would later define Fairbrother. Away from the spotlight, Cadell's personal life was quieter and more guarded. He married actress Rebecca Croft, daughter of High to High co-creator David Croft, which bound him even more closely to the show's creative family. But while his professional life seemed charmed, his health was a constant shadow. In the early 1990s, he suffered a near-fatal heart attack, forcing him to reassess his career. Not long after, he was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, a battle he kept largely private from the public. Despite his illness, Cadell continued to work, lending his rich, distinctive voice to radio dramas and narration projects even as his body weakened. Friends recalled his refusal to let illness dictate his spirit, often showing up to rehearsals with the same warmth and wit that had endeared him to audiences. But the disease was unrelenting. On March 6, 1996, Simon Cadell died at the age of 45. His death came as a shock, not just because of his youth, but because it silenced a talent still very much in its prime. Felix Bonis, as Fred Quilly. When Felix Bonis joined High to High in 1980 as Fred Quilly, he was 54 years old, playing the gruff but good-hearted camp handyman whose equestrian past was as much a badge of pride as it was a source of comedy. Quilly's short temper, stubborn streak, and knack for getting into mishaps made him a perfect fit in the madcap world of Maplin's holiday camp. And Bonis brought a lived-in authenticity to the role that only a seasoned performer could deliver. Born March 30, 1922, in Harwell, Berkshire, England, Felix was no stranger to life's unpredictability. As a young man, he served in the Royal Berkshire Regiment during World War II, surviving the harrowing D-Day landings. But his wartime service came at a cost. He was wounded in action and spent time recovering before turning to entertainment as a means of moving forward. Starting as a stand-up comic in post-war Britain, he honed a razor-sharp wit that carried him through variety shows, pantomimes, and endless nights on the club circuit. By the time television came calling in the 1970s, Bonis was a familiar face to live audiences. His pre-High to High TV work included guest spots in Are You Being Served and Dad's Army, but Fred Quilly gave him national recognition. Off-screen, Felix led a modest life with his wife Mavis, whom he married in 1946. The couple weathered lean years together, particularly during periods when acting work was scarce and the club scene was in decline. In later life, Bonis suffered a devastating personal blow when Mavis passed away, leaving him deeply lonely after more than half a century of marriage. Health problems began to mount, including arthritis and hearing loss, which limited his stage work. Still, he never completely retired, occasionally appearing at fan events and speaking warmly of his High to High years. On September 13, 2009, Felix Bonis died at the age of 87. His passing marked the loss of one of British comedy's most enduring character actors, a man who had faced war, hardship, and personal grief, yet always found his way back to laughter. For those who remember him, Fred Quilly wasn't just a handyman in a fictional holiday camp. He was Felix himself, tough, resourceful, and quietly full of heart. Barry Howard as Barry Stewart Hargreaves. When Barry Howard stepped into High to High in 1980 as Barry Stewart Hargreaves, he was 43 years old, impeccably dressed, impeccably mannered, and utterly inseparable from his on-screen dance partner, Ivonne. Barry was the camp's resident ballroom instructor, flamboyant, theatrical, and prone to cutting remarks that could slice through any pretense. It was a role that allowed Howard to pour in equal parts campy humor and refined stagecraft, creating a character as memorable for his sharp tongue as for his perfectly measured waltz steps. Born July 9, 1937, in Nottingham, England, Barry grew up with a love for both performance and glamour. Before finding television fame, he honed his craft in repertory theater and pantomime, spending years on the road in touring productions. His natural poise and precise movement were no accident. Howard trained as a dancer before fully committing to acting, and this discipline became the backbone of his stage presence. Off-screen, Barry lived a more private life, but was known among friends for his quick wit and devotion to his craft. He never married, and colleagues often remarked that theater was his one true lifelong partner. After High to High ended in 1988, he continued to appear on television in shows such as You Rang, M'Lord, and Oh, Dr. Beeching, and he remained active in theater well into his later years, often touring in plays and pantomimes where his old-school showmanship could shine. Behind the sparkle, however, Howard faced serious health challenges. In his final years, he battled blood cancer, undergoing treatment while still making public appearances when he could. Those close to him spoke of his determination to maintain dignity and humor, even when the illness left him physically weakened. Barry Howard died on April 28, 2016, at the age of 78. Diane Holland as Yvonne Stewart Hargreaves. When Diane Holland first appeared in High to High in 1980 as Yvonne Stewart Hargreaves, she was 50 years old, exuding elegance, precision, and a withering disdain for anything less than perfect posture. As one half of Maplin's resident ballroom dance duo alongside Barry Stewart Hargreaves, Yvonne was imperious, impeccably dressed, and unapologetically snobbish. Holland infused her with razor-sharp timing and an arch delivery that made every put-down sparkle, turning what could have been a one-note caricature into one of the series' most enduring creations. Born February 28, 1930, in Melbourne, Australia, and raised in England, Diane was steeped in performance from an early age. She trained as a professional dancer before transitioning to acting, working in repertory theater, pantomimes, and musicals. Her early stage work took her across the UK and abroad, where she became known for her discipline and stage presence. By the time High to High came along, she was already a seasoned performer with decades of experience. Off-screen, Holland was deeply private. She never married and kept her personal life away from publicity, though colleagues described her as fiercely loyal to friends and meticulous about her craft. She was particularly close to her sister, actress and choreographer Jane Tucker, with whom she often collaborated. The role of Yvonne came with a hidden challenge. During the run of High to High, Holland was battling severe arthritis, a condition that made the demanding physicality of ballroom scenes far more painful than audiences ever realized. She kept her illness quiet, refusing to let it undermine her performance or the glamour of her character. After High to High ended in 1988, Holland reprised her role in stage adaptations and continued to work in television, but recurring health issues gradually forced her to slow down. In her later years, she endured long-term illness, retreating from public life while still cherishing correspondence with fans. Diane Holland died on January 24, 2009, at the age of 78. Ken Barry, voice of Holiday Rock. When High to High opened each week with the jaunty, feel-good anthem Holiday Rock, the voice carrying those cheerful notes belonged to Ken Barry. By the time the sitcom debuted in 1980, Barry was 47 years old, already an experienced session singer and voice artist whose warmth and clarity could turn a simple melody into a memory that lasted decades. Though he never appeared on screen, his performance set the tone for the entire show, playful, inviting, and steeped in nostalgia. Born January 9, 1933, in Stoke-on-Trent, England, Barry, real name Leslie Hume, grew up in a working-class family where music was both an escape and a passion. He began his career singing in dance bands before moving into radio jingles, commercials, and session recordings during the 1960s and 70s. His vocal adaptability landed him steady work in the entertainment industry, though much of it went uncredited. Outside of High to High, Barry became a familiar presence to millions of children as the narrator and voice of the beloved BBC series Postman Pat from 1981 to 2012, recording not only the show's theme but also the speaking voices of its characters. It was a job that brought him a quiet but enduring fame. Parents recognized his voice instantly, even if they couldn't place his face. In his personal life, Barry was a devoted husband and father, though he kept his family out of the public eye. Friends spoke of his work ethic and perfectionism, often spending hours in the studio to ensure every inflection and note was exactly right. In his later years, however, his health began to falter. Battling liver cancer, Barry gradually withdrew from public life, focusing on his family and legacy. Ken Barry died on July 29, 2016, at the age of 83. Brenda Cowling as Lady Camper, Nora. Various roles. When Brenda Cowling appeared in High to High throughout the 1980s, she was already in her late 50s, slipping seamlessly into a variety of supporting roles, from the posh and overbearing Lady Camper to the ever-observant Nora. She had the rare ability to make even a fleeting scene memorable, thanks to her expressive face, booming delivery, and impeccable comic timing. Whether delivering a sharp retort or reacting with exaggerated horror, Cowling brought texture to the Maplin's holiday camp world, proving that even smaller parts could leave a lasting mark. Born April 23, 1925, in Islington, London, Brenda Lillian Cowling grew up during the Great Depression, an experience that gave her both resilience and a keen sense of humor. After training at the Guildhall School of Music and Drama, she entered repertory theater and soon became a regular in touring productions. Her big break in television came in the 1960s, and she quickly became a go-to actress for British sitcoms and dramas, appearing in Are You Being Served?, Dad's Army, and Some Mothers Do Have 'Em. Off-screen, Cowling was known for her warmth but also her fierce independence. She never married, preferring the freedom to focus entirely on her craft. Colleagues recalled her generosity with younger actors, but also her refusal to tolerate sloppy work. She had little patience for anyone who didn't take the profession seriously. Despite a long and successful career, she often spoke candidly about the financial insecurity of acting, admitting that there were years when she took on whatever role was available just to make ends meet. In later life, Cowling suffered from declining mobility, the lingering effects of a hip injury, and eventually heart-related health problems. Yet she continued to work well into her 80s, making her final television appearance in 2009. Brenda Cowling died on October 2, 2010, at the age of 85. Her passing marked the end of a career that spanned more than half a century. John Leisurier as Hugo Buckton. When John Leisurier appeared in High to High in the mid-1980s as Hugo Buckton, he was already in his early 70s. A distinguished guest star whose effortlessly urbane manner made him a perfect fit for the refined, slightly world-weary character. Buxton was the sort of man who looked perfectly at home sipping a gin and tonic while surveying the eccentric goings-on at Maplin's holiday camp, and Leisurier played him with his trademark understated charm. Born April 5, 1912, in Bedford, England, John Elton Leisurier Halliley was educated at public school before training as an actor at the Fay Compton Studio of Dramatic Art. His early stage career was interrupted by World War II, during which he served in the Royal Tank Regiment. Returning to acting after the war, he became a prolific character actor, appearing in dozens of British films in the 1950s and 1960s, often cast as mild-mannered professionals or quietly authoritative figures. Leisureur's defining role came as Sergeant Arthur Wilson in Dad's Army, 1968 to 1977, where his dry delivery and impeccable timing made him a national treasure. Off-screen, however, his life was far more turbulent. He married 3 times, most famously to actress Hattie Jacques, whose high-profile affair with another man played out under the tabloid spotlight, while Leisurier remained outwardly gracious, even allowing Jacques and her lover to live under the same roof for a time. Friends described him as gentle to a fault, but also quietly haunted by feelings of inadequacy and a dependence on alcohol, which shadowed much of his later life. By the time of his High appearance, Leisureur's health was in serious decline. Years of heavy drinking had damaged his liver, and he was diagnosed with cirrhosis. Despite this, he continued to accept select acting roles, determined to keep working while he still could. John Leisurier died on November 15, 1983, at the age of 71, not long after his appearance on the show. Jeffrey Holland as Spike Dixon. When High premiered in 1980, Jeffrey Holland was 34 years old, stepping into the role of Spike Dixon, the eager, slightly hapless comic who dressed in outrageous costumes and endured endless indignities for the sake of guest entertainment. Spike was the beating heart of Maplin's holiday camp, always ready to pitch in with a grin, even when things went spectacularly wrong. Holland played him with boundless energy and an instinctive warmth that made audiences root for him, even as his schemes fell flat. Born July 17, 1946, in Walsall, Staffordshire, Jeffrey Holland trained at the Birmingham School of Speech Training and Dramatic Art before cutting his teeth in repertory theater. His early television work included small parts in comedies and dramas, but High gave him a breakout platform. The role of Spike was tailor-made for his natural clowning skills, quick timing, and ability to throw himself, sometimes literally, into physical comedy. Off-screen, Holland forged close friendships with his castmates and became part of the creative family of writers Jimmy Perry and David Croft, later starring in their follow-up sitcoms You Rang, My Lord and Oh, Dr. Beeching. His marriage to actress Judy Buckton was a happy and enduring one, with the pair often appearing together on stage. Unlike many of his colleagues, Holland has not only survived but thrived beyond the show's original run, touring extensively in theater and reprising Spike for nostalgic stage adaptations. As of today, Jeffrey Holland is still alive, continuing to work and appear at fan events. Anthony Michael Hall as Rusty Griswald. When Anthony Michael Hall appeared in National Lampoon's Vacation, 1983. As Rusty Griswald, he was just 15 years old, wide-eyed, sarcastic, and perfectly embodying the all-American teenager reluctantly trapped in a chaotic family road trip. Rusty's exasperated one-liners and deadpan delivery became a highlight of the film, cementing Hall's place in the pop culture landscape of the 1980s. Born April 14, 1968, in West Roxbury, Massachusetts, Hall began acting in commercials at the age of 7, before making his way onto television in The Gold Bug and The Guiding Light. His big break came with Vacation, but he refused to be boxed in as a supporting teen character. Just 2 years later, he became a core member of the famed Brat Pack, starring in John Hughes classics like 16 Candles, 1984, The Breakfast Club, 1985, and Weird Science, 1985. Off-screen, Hall's career had its share of turbulence. As a young star, he battled the pressures of sudden fame, typecasting, and personal struggles, including a very public fight against substance abuse in the late 1980s. Determined to rebuild his career, he took diverse roles in both television and film, eventually finding renewed recognition with his lead role in The Dead Zone, 2002 to 2007. Unlike many of his contemporaries, Hall has survived Hollywood's harsher turns, continuing to work steadily into the present day. Now, in his mid-50s, he's known not only for his early iconic roles, but also for his resilience in an industry that often discards its young stars. Kenneth Connor as Sammy Morris. When Kenneth Connor appeared in High to High during the mid-1980s as Sammy Morris, the ever-smiling, old-school comic and camp entertainer, he was already in his mid-70s, a veteran of British stage and screen whose presence brought an extra layer of authenticity to the role. Sammy was the kind of character who could turn even the dampest holiday week into a lively memory, and Connor's decades of experience in comedy made him a natural fit for Maplin's world. Born June 6, 1918 in Islington, London, Kenneth Connor trained at the Central School of Speech and Drama before serving in the British Army during World War II, where he honed his comedic skills entertaining troops. After the war, he built a remarkable career across stage, radio, and film, becoming a household name as one of the original stalwarts of the Carry On film series from the late 1950s to the early 1970s. His trademark blend of frantic energy, rubbery expressions, and rapid-fire delivery made him one of Britain's most beloved comic actors. Off-screen, Connor married Margaret Dixon in 1942, and the pair remained together until his death, an enduring union rare in show business. He was known for being both devoted to his family and intensely disciplined about his craft, often arriving hours early to rehearsal. But the later years of his career were not without challenges. He battled health issues, including the onset of cancer, which he kept largely private while continuing to work. Despite his illness, Connor's professionalism never wavered. He worked almost until the end of his life, appearing on stage and television with the same gusto he'd shown in his youth. Kenneth Connor died on November 28, 1993, at the age of 75. His passing marked the loss of a performer whose career had spanned more than half a century, from wartime concert parties to sitcom guest spots. John Fortune as Max Tukesbury. When John Fortune appeared in High to High as Max Tukesbury, he was in his early 50s, bringing with him a dry, razor-sharp wit that made the character stand out despite limited screen time. Max was written as a man of quiet authority with a twinkle of mischief, and Fortune's deadpan delivery gave him an understated comedic punch that contrasted beautifully with the broader antics of Maplin's holiday camp. Born June 30, 1939, in Bristol, England, John Fortune, real name John Wood, was educated at Bristol Cathedral School and King's College, Cambridge. Initially pursuing English literature, he gravitated toward performance during the early 1960s satire boom, becoming a key figure in Britain's intellectual comedy scene. Alongside John Bird and Rory Bremner, Fortune became known for incisive political sketches and character-driven humor that blended charm with biting social observation. Though he was best known for his satirical television work, Fortune often took on acting roles in dramas and comedies, relishing the chance to disappear into a character. His career outside High to High included appearances in A Fish Called Wanda, 1988, Matchpoint, 2005, and decades of acclaimed sketch work. Off-screen, Fortune was a private man, married to Susan Cardwell, with whom he had 2 children. Friends described him as wry, generous, and fiercely intelligent, but also someone who wrestled with the pressures of staying relevant in an ever-changing entertainment industry. In his later years, Fortune faced health problems, including a long battle with leukemia, which he bore with quiet dignity while continuing to work. John Fortune died on December 31, 2013, at the age of 74. His passing marked the end of a career that spanned 5 decades, touching both mainstream audiences and political satire aficionados. From Ted Bovice's cheeky grin to Yvonne Stewart Hargreaves' icy elegance, these 13 High to High stars gave us characters we'll never forget. Their laughter, charm, and talent lit up our screens, and still do today. Though they're gone, their spirit lives on every time we hear that familiar hi de hi. What's your favorite memory of them? Share it with us, and let's keep their legacy alive together.